Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. We're only a couple of weeks into the new administration, and it's been busy. Here to join us to kind of break some of that down here is Representative Rick Crawford from up there in Northeast Arkansas. Boss, how you doing this morning?
Good.
Good. Before we kind of look ahead, I want to go back for just a moment here. You were the only Arkansas delegation to vote in objection to election results. I think people just kind of want to hear from you. What were your thoughts on that? Kind of why did you go that way?
Well, there were several states that there were some irregularities with which they conducted their elections with regard to the laws. For example, in Pennsylvania, we know that there were some unilateral decisions made by officials that weren't delegated by the state legislatures that had to do with, for example, voter ID, poll locations being open beyond a certain time, things of this nature. And those decisions were done unilaterally without being delegated by the state legislatures, which in fact is in violation not only of their state constitution, but by extension, the U.S. Constitution. So that was the concern, because in Arkansas, you know, we're following the rules. This is the rule book, and it applies to everyone. We followed the rules in Arkansas. Other states didn't. That has the effect of disenfranchising voters in Arkansas. That was what I believed. I communicated that well in advance to my constituents, and based on their feedback, I think they were very pleased with that vote.
And also, too, as we get into this coming week here, now you guys aren't necessarily a part of it over on the House side, but there is an impeachment that will be heard in the Senate. Thoughts on that? You have kind of a couple of schools of thought on this. One, where you have to hold the president accountable if that is the case, and then also, two, the guy's out of office. Why are we wasting time with this? Kind of where do you fall on that?
Well, and it specifically says that there's provision to impeach the president. However, this is not the president. He's out of office. The article of impeachment was passed in the House after he was out of office, or effectively, I mean, he was still in office because it was prior to January 20th. But I believe that as a private citizen, he doesn't get the same treatment. I mean, you can't remove him from private citizenship. He's already removed from office. Therefore, this seems like a moot point. And I think probably the fact that Chief Justice Roberts declined to preside over the proceeding speaks volumes as to its constitutionality.
Now let's kind of get into some of the stuff that'll be going on here with the Biden administration. They've already implemented a travel ban to South Africa. I know that's something you're kind of against a little bit here. Kind of what's involved with that?
So a lot of people don't realize how much South African labor is utilized on farms in Arkansas. So they require H-2A visas. And so when we have farmers who rely heavily on migrant workforce, a lot of whom come from South Africa, that travel ban, particularly at this time, would have put a whole lot of pressure on farmers, not just in East Arkansas, but around the country. And so the consideration that I had was, can there be some provisions whereby a South African H-2A visa migrant worker could enter the country under a quarantine or some provision? We went to the administration with that. They recognized that, okay, yeah, we probably can make some modifications to this rule, and that was the consideration that was given. So that was a win for farmers in East Arkansas who, right, wrong, or indifferent, they rely heavily on migrant labor, and a lot of it comes from South Africa.
Now, how long has that actually been going on? Because, a lot of folks would probably never have guessed South Africa as some of that labor force.
Most people equate H-2A visas with Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. In fact, South Africans have been a very prevalent provider of agriculture work for 5-6 years now, maybe longer, and they are very reliable. And for whatever reason, they have become a really important part of the workforce in East Arkansas in particular.
Now, another concern I know that you've got is the Biden administration freezing the coronavirus food assistance program. Lot to do with that, some of the changing markets, things like that. How does that affect a lot of those folks there in Northeast Arkansas?
Well, really anybody in production agriculture is going to be impacted. There was roughly $30 billion in unspent money associated with the CFAP program, and farmers were hoping for another round to kind of offset some of the, the economic losses they'd sustained as a result of the coronavirus, and that was taken off the table. And so we just saw, I think last night, Thursday night, over the Votorama, the Vice President Harris broke a 50-50 tie on this relief package that the administration is proposing. There's nothing in there that really we can crow about with regard to rural America. What my concern is that the more we continue to penalize rural America, for example, Keystone Pipeline, suspending that project, removing the funding for CFAP, which supports production agriculture, the more pressure you're going to see on nutrition programs. Now, what we want to do, obviously, is maintain continuity with nutrition for those who are food insecure, but you're punishing the very people who provide the resources necessary to secure our food sources. And so there needs to be some consideration given to those of us in rural America who actually provide the food and fiber that the rest of the country, in fact, the rest of the world rely on.
And I know another hot topic here, kind of the final thing here, and we'll wrap this up here. The voting out of Marjorie Greene Taylor. Did you see that warranted? This seems kind of unprecedented. Where do you, what kind of precedent does this kind of set going forward, especially those who are a little more outspoken, maybe have some differing opinions?
I think this is a dangerous sort of tit-for-tat scenario that's been teed up here, because the Democrats won't always be in the majority. And by doing this, not allowing, they effectively took away the minority's ability to handle those issues in-house. We did this with Steve King. If you remember, a couple of years back, he was removed from his committees. Duncan Hunter was removed from his committees, and this was for various offenses. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I have not had a conversation with, I haven't met her yet, I haven't gotten to know her yet, but her comments prior to, if in fact those comments were true, they're reprehensible. We reject and rebuke those comments in every form. However, we've seen comments, that was before she was elected, we've seen comments from members on the other side who are now casting those stones, who have made comments similar and even worse while they or since they've been elected, and yet not a single comment to rebuke people like Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic comments, Rashida Tlaib for her anti-Semitic comments, Maxine Waters for her comments about she wants to take out the president and encouraging violence against administration officials. Not a single word of, not even individually rebuking those members, and yet we're taking action against a member who has since recanted and apologized and asked for forgiveness publicly, and yet we continue down that road. This is a dangerous precedent, and I don't support that.
Well, there you have it. Straight from the horse's mouth. Representative Rick Crawford, it's a busy time up there in D.C., and we certainly appreciate you taking a little time with us this morning.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right. Well, when we come back, there is a new name in the race for Lieutenant Governor. Dr. Greg Bledsoe is coming up next year. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
It's our floor model spa sale at Family Leisure.
Huge savings. It's time to make room for incoming spas. Deep discounts on all in-stock and display model spas and swim spas. 6-person hydrotherapy spas under $5,000. We've got more spas in stock than anyone else. Over $500 in free upgrades with every spa purchase. Plus, receive free LED lights and waterfall on most models. Special financing available. Stop in today.
Floor model spa sale going on now at Family Leisure.
The pain would like shoot up my heels. I would tiptoe out of bed because my heels hurt so badly. When I went to the Good Feet store, I had a free consultation, free fittings. They allowed me to try on the arch supports. I walked around and I started sobbing because I had no pain. There were no gimmicks. It's just try them on. If it doesn't work for you, then don't buy them.
See if they work for you with a free fitting and test walk at the Good Feet store.
Replacing your old electrical panel? That's a don't do it yourself. Call Mr. Sparky instead to schedule your electrical panel replacement.
You don't have to put up with any malarkey. Call 888-8-SPARKY.
You know every tear, every smile, every heartbeat. You have watched them grow, and you have become closer with every moment. At HealthMart, we understand. We know you and your family and your healthcare history. We know our community because we are locally owned and operated. Pharmacists you know, trust, and who know you by name. HealthMart Pharmacy, caring for you and about you.
This has got the steak and the sizzle.
The tots on this are just crispy and they're flavorful.
This will keep you out of my tots.
Sonic Extra Long Ultimate Cheesesteaks. Yeah, this might keep me out of your tots.
We're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. Just this past week, we officially got a race for lieutenant governor as the Arkansas Surgeon General, Dr. Greg Bledsoe, tossed his name into the ring. He joins us now to give us a little insight into this decision. And Dr. Bledsoe, we appreciate you being on here. And I guess first things first would be, why on earth would you want to jump into the foray that is politics?
That's a great question, Jay. And the fact of the matter is, it is a bit outside my comfort zone. I mean, I'm a physician, not a politician. I've never done anything like this before. You know, it's very different than working in a hospital and taking care of patients. But I think when you sum everything up, I want Arkansas to win. And I think that we have great opportunities in front of us. And one of the most inspiring things that's happened to me in my entire medical career was watching our little state respond to the pandemic that hit the world a year ago. And at the first part of that pandemic, when there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, I spent hours on the phone with community leaders, industry and business leaders, faith leaders all across this state, in addition to the healthcare folks. And every time we asked them to help us with the pandemic, the response was always yes. And it was an incredible, incredible example of what we can accomplish as a young, small state when we're trying to solve big problems. And it made me want to take that sort of teamwork and camaraderie to the Lieutenant Governor's office and see what other problems we could solve.
And I guess, too, what kind of influence do you want to have in that office? Because there have been candidates in the past where they've literally wanted to file bills that would basically eliminate that position. So Lieutenant Governor is kind of slept on when it comes to the other constitutional offices. So what kind of influence do you want to kind of bring to this position?
Well, it's a good point. The lieutenant governor position doesn't have a lot of responsibility, but it does have a microphone. And so to me, the advantage of being lieutenant governor is you can talk about the issues that are important to you. And you can use that microphone to be divisive, or you can use that microphone to paint a vision for the state and move us forward. And so my attraction to it is not the fact that it's a title or anything like that. I have no lust for political title. I'm not a career politician. I'm not looking in any way to use this as the next rung up to apply for some other office. This, to me, is a strategic move to use the microphone of the lieutenant governor position to promote the values that we all have as Arkansans and to put us in a better position 4 years from now than where we are today.
And I guess part of that microphone is just presiding over the Senate. Now, unfortunately, though, you're not going to be able to boss your mom around in this position because she'll term out Miss Cecile Bledsoe. But, when it comes to just the politicking and having to deal with some of the in and out and some of the infighting that's bound to take place, I mean, obviously you can glean a lot from her, but what do you kind of, I guess, the most nervous about that aspect of the job of having to actually preside over the Senate?
Well, first of all, I would just say no one bosses my mom around. She's her own person. She's one of the strongest people I know. And she is term limited out, and I'm proud of her because she's been in politics a while and it hasn't changed her one bit, which is something that is very rare today. But I think the thing that most concerns me about stepping into the political arena or dealing with the legislature is I'm a private sector guy. I'm used to, private sector people focusing on a problem and then solving it. And in politics today, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of cloak and dagger. And, it can be frustrating for those of us who have significant private sector experience stepping into that world. I've sort of been on the sidelines of that world as Surgeon General looking in. So I have an idea of what I'm getting into, but I think that will probably be the biggest struggle for me.
And I guess, too, being in constitutional office, we've got to get a stance on some of the policies here. I mean, where's your stance on, things like the Second Amendment? Because there's been a lot of bills filed here in the early going when it comes to that. Also, I know some tax issues have come up, at least in the governor's race. There's been a lot of talk about that real early on. So I guess where do you stand with some of those issues?
Well, look, I'm confident that I'm the most conservative person in this race. And my conservative credentials go back a long time. I've been voting conservative and helping conservatives win for all the way back to high school. So I don't think my policy positions are going to shock anyone. I'm pro-Second Amendment. I'm for lower taxes. I want an efficient, streamlined government. I'm pro-life. I'm, a traditional conservative. And what I want for our state is I want us to win and win together as a group. I don't want just the wealthy people to win. I don't want just this group to win. I want the entire state of Arkansas to win. And I believe that the way you win is by promoting conservative economic policy and promoting what I call entrepreneurial capitalism, which is teaching people how to create jobs and then supporting those entrepreneurs and supporting those small business people as they try to do their thing in the business world. That is the only thing historically and globally that has taken large groups of people and moved them up the economic ladder. Not government intervention, not government handouts. Entrepreneurial capitalism, that's the way forward for our state, and I feel very strongly in it.
And I guess quickly here, being in the medical field, I mean, obviously we hope to be out of a pandemic by the time your election would come around here, but what are some of the changes that, yeah, you hope so anyways, but what are some of the things maybe that we've learned from the pandemic that maybe would be able to propel the state forward, especially when we're talking, 18 months, 2 years from now?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that when you're dealing with a big crisis like the pandemic, you need the private sector involved. You need it to be a partnership between the authority of the government and the private sector innovation and energy and focus. And I think you fail if you depend entirely on the government apparatus to solve these problems. And so whether that's, in any area. And so whether you're dealing with a pandemic or you're dealing with some other big crisis, you've got to get the private and the public sector to work together. And that's how you solve these big problems. And so looking forward, the pandemic is the big thing that everyone's talking about now, but there will be other crises that will occur over the next few years. And I just want, our leaders, whoever they are, and myself, assuming I become the lieutenant governor, to solve problems using the role of government appropriately, but connecting the private sector partners appropriately in there to help get their expertise, because there's a lot they can offer.
All right, so there you have it. He is now running for lieutenant governor of the state of Arkansas. He's currently the Arkansas Surgeon General. Dr. Greg Bledsoe, now that you're getting into the foray here, I'm sure we'll have you back on soon enough.
I'd love that. Thanks for having me on, Jay.
All right, we appreciate you. And when we come back, we'll get you caught up on the latest, not only on the Hill, but also here in The Rock. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
My fiance right now is in labor. We're having twins. I need to get to her. I'm coming right now, okay?
Please just get here, Kevin.
Who is that? I thought we had a break-in.
And what were you gonna do? Give him the funk?
Hit him in the face and say, "Sax to be you."
That actually would have been dope.
Keenan premieres February 16th on NBC.
The leaves are beautiful until they end up in your gutters. But with Guardian Gutter Protection, you'll never have to clean your gutters again. Let us keep you off the ladder and protect you and your home. Guardian Gutter Protection keeps out leaves, sticks, pine needles, even those annoying critters. We offer a 100% money-back, no-clog, hassle-free Guardian guarantee. Call today for our holiday special or check us out on the web at guardiangutterprotection.com.
Looking for your one-stop shop for all your boating essentials? Come to H2O Sports and Marine. From top brands and knowledgeable sales staff to quality parts and expert service, we're here to help you find exactly what you need. And now with locations in North Little Rock and Greers Ferry Lake, H2O Sports and Marine is here to get you out on the water in a boat you'll love with service you can trust.
Hi, I'm Missy Gibson. My family and I would like to invite you to see all that John Gibson Auto Sales has to offer. We have one of the largest, most diverse, and newest inventory of any buy here, pay here dealers in the state. We have cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, campers, performance trailers, and boats. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance you. Check us out at johngibsonautosales.com and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
Love lower than low prices? Then get more ways to save at Kroger, where you can find personalized coupons, weekly deals, and rewards like fuel points. All for prices that are lower than low. On food that's fresher than fresh. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
We're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. Congress is working to craft the next COVID-19 relief package after an all-nighter on Thursday. Our Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer has more.
After 15 hours of debate, the Senate is now moving forward on the next COVID-19 relief package following a tie-breaking vote from Vice President Kamala Harris.
The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative.
In her first tie-breaking vote, Vice President Kamala Harris put Democrats on the path towards passing President Joe Biden's nearly $2 trillion COVID relief package.
This first big step to putting our country back on the road to recovery.
The early morning vote came after 15 hours of debate in a process known as vote-a-rama, where senators could propose as many amendments as they wanted.
I would urge the adoption of my amendment.
Republicans used the opportunity to force votes on controversial issues like court packing and immigration.
This is going to create chaos on the border.
But there was some bipartisanship. Nearly every senator supported an amendment led by West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin and Maine Republican Susan Collins to ensure upper-income taxpayers don't receive stimulus checks. Democrats will see if they gain any more GOP support as they begin to craft the coronavirus relief package. This is only the first step in passing COVID relief. Congress will now get to work on deciding what will go into the package, and that could take several weeks. Reporting in Washington, I'm Kelly Meyer.
A bill that would end daylight savings time in Arkansas was brought up in committee last week. State Representative Johnny Rye presented what looks to have Arkansas permanently on daylight savings time. Much of the concern, though, from the committee was being on an island amongst other states and how that would potentially affect commerce. Representative Rye maintains this is something Arkansans, like myself, want.
The people in this state want this, okay? Now, we're going to work it through committee. We're going to change things around just a little bit, but people are tired of two different time frames.
No action was taken on the bill, and Rye said surrounding states are also exploring this option. We will keep you up to date on what happens. It's called the Arkansas Occupational Licensing of Uniformed Service Members, Veterans, and Spouses Act of 2021. Right now, the state honors a reciprocal license in any career field for an active duty service member. But this bill would extend the same privileges to spouses, widows, and those in the National Guard or the reserves. Our Cassandra Webb has more.
First came love.
When I first met him, I thought he was a hockey player.
Then came marriage. Then 5 moves for military spouse Jessica Somm and her family. She knows the challenges that come with licensure in different states.
You're going to have to spend more time. You're going to have to spend more money, more resources just to begin working.
Somm's a teacher now, but her first career was in skincare. And when she moved from South Carolina to Arkansas,
the biggest part of that issue was that I needed 150 more clinical hours to transfer into Arkansas. So that was an extra expense and time in order just to be able to work here in the state.
And after a career switch to education, licensing roadblocks made her underemployed.
I was a teacher's aide, which doesn't require a college degree, and I had a master's degree.
That's why she supports the bill, authored by District 29 Senator Ricky Hill.
So we're just trying to make this easy for Arkansas to be what we consider the most friendly state to our military families out there.
We have a lot to contribute to the local community, and while it may only be for a couple of years, we can do a lot in those years.
And this bill has passed out of the Senate unanimously. It now heads to the House Public Health Committee. State Senator Matthew Pitch made a campaign-related announcement this past week.
I, Senator Matt Pitch, am announcing that I will run for Arkansas State Treasurer in the next election cycle. Thank you.
Pitch becomes the first person to announce his candidacy for state treasurer. Current treasurer Dennis Milligan will term out of office in 2022. Pitch says he is looking to build a team that can weather Arkansas through any economic environment.
Being a state treasurer in this state is building a team to prevent the downturn in any type of economy and still keeping the valuable tax dollars of our citizens of Arkansas in safe way.
Pitch also said he's doing this because he wants to be the first person from Sebastian County to be elected to a constitutional office. And we are back to wrap it up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Thanks to your generosity, Marines have delivered Christmas to children in need since 1947.
Your news every hour in prime time is on News Nation on WGN America. News Nation reported on Wyoming miners learning new careers as coal jobs dwindle.
Humans can adapt to change.
As construction on the wall stops, we covered mixed reaction at the border.
We should build more of it. They want to live a better life.
News Nation covers your nation every night starting at 8, 7 Central on WGN America. Go to newsnationnow.com to find WGN America on your cable or satellite provider.
Injured? Let's talk about getting help now. Anywhere in the state, dial 8. Whether injured at night, on a weekend, or a holiday, anywhere in the state, dial 8. 888-8888. Let me say that again. Any place, anytime, anywhere in Arkansas, anywhere in the state, just dial 8. We're local lawyers, and it's a local number. Injured? Anywhere in the state, dial 8.
We're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
We got a clean desk. Hopefully it was a clean show. That is it. We are back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Get the Capitol View podcast wherever you consume your podcasts. We will see you right here next weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.